73 minutes ago, something impossible happened. Ground stations monitoring space debris detected radio transmissions from objects that have been silent for 4 decades. Soviet-era satellites. Cosmos 1408. Molniya 1T. Selena D. Objects declared dead in the 1980s. Objects with depleted batteries, failed solar panels, frozen systems, suddenly transmitting. Not noise, not random signals, structured data, encrypted protocols, and every single one began transmitting within seconds of each other at February 10, 2026, 1647 UTC. Exactly when 3I Atlas passed directly overhead of the constellation of these dead satellites. Dead satellites don't wake up. Electronics without power for 40 years don't spontaneously reboot. Frozen batteries don't suddenly hold charge. But 17 Soviet-era satellites just did exactly that. And the timing proves it wasn't coincidence. Atlas passed within 2,000 kilometers of this orbital debris field. Atlas's electromagnetic signature spiked, and dead technology from Cold War era came alive. That's not natural electromagnetic pulse. That's targeted activation. That's remote power transmission or system override. That's demonstration of capability we didn't know existed. And it's terrifying. Before I show you the radio telemetry data that space tracking networks captured showing 17 dead satellites suddenly broadcasting, before I explain why the activation sequence and signal characteristics prove this was Atlas-initiated, not spontaneous malfunction, before I reveal what the fact that Atlas can remotely power and control 40-year-old human technology means for every satellite and system we currently operate, I need you to understand what dead satellite activation represents strategically. If you can wake up satellites that have been dead for decades, you can access satellites that are currently operational. If you can override Soviet-era electronics, you can override modern systems. If you can transmit power wirelessly at 2,000 kilometers, you can disable or hijack any spacecraft in Earth orbit. In the comments below, tell me this. When alien spacecraft passes over field of dead satellites and they all activate simultaneously broadcasting encrypted Soviet military protocols, what's the simpler explanation? 40-year coincidence where 17 separate failed systems happen to reboot at same instant? Or Atlas demonstrated it can remotely control human space technology? Legacy technology, dead technology. Which means current technology is completely vulnerable because one requires impossible simultaneous failure reversal, and the other requires accepting that every satellite we have is now potentially under Atlas's control. Let me start with which satellites activated. The list is specific, verified by Space Command, ESA, and Russian Space Agency independently. Cosmos 1408. Soviet ELINT satellite launched 1982. Destroyed by Russian anti-satellite test 2021. But main bus still intact and now transmitting. Molniya 1T series. 4 satellites from 1970s, 1980s. Molniya communication constellation, all officially dead since mid-1980s. All now active. Selena D. 3 reconnaissance satellites from 1980s. SIGINT program. Dead since late 1980s, now broadcasting. Cosmos 2004, 2108, 2151. Navigation satellites from 1980s, superseded and deactivated, now transmitting. Plus 6 additional objects from 1970s, 1980s Soviet programs. What they have in common: all Soviet, all from 1970s, 1980s era, all declared dead or deactivated decades ago, all in orbits between 800 to 2,000 kilometers altitude, and all within geometric pattern that Atlas passed directly through during orbital maneuver yesterday. Now, let me address the activation sequence. Space tracking networks maintain passive monitoring of radio spectrum even for dead satellites. Standard practice to detect any unexpected transmissions indicating collision damage or debris creation. At February 10, 16 hours, 47 minutes, and 12 seconds UTC, first transmission detected from Cosmos 1408. 32 seconds later, Molniya 1T07 begins transmitting. Over next 6 minutes, all 17 objects begin broadcasting in staggered sequence. But here's critical detail: the stagger isn't random. It correlates with distance from Atlas's position at moment of first activation. Objects closest to Atlas activated first. Objects farther away activated progressively later. Propagation delay of 3.3 microseconds per kilometer for electromagnetic radiation produces pattern where activation spreads outward from Atlas's position at speed of light. This is electromagnetic wavefront. Atlas transmitted something. That something propagated outward, and as it reached each satellite, that satellite activated. Let me walk you through what satellites are transmitting. Radio signature analysis shows transmissions match Soviet-era protocols. Specifically, encrypted military telemetry formats from 1970s, 1980s. Exact formats vary by satellite type. ELINT satellites transmit reconnaissance data formats. Communication satellites transmit message relay protocols. Navigation satellites transmit positioning data. All authentic to original mission parameters. But here's the impossible part. The satellites are transmitting as if their missions never ended. Cosmos 1408, destroyed in 2021, is transmitting pre-destruction telemetry format. Molniya satellites dead since 1980s are attempting to relay communications that don't exist. Navigation satellites are broadcasting orbital parameters for constellation that stopped operating in 1991. It's like they were frozen in time when they died and now resume exactly where they stopped. No awareness of time passage, no updated programming, just continuation of decades-old mission protocols. Encryption analysis confirms the transmissions use Soviet military encryption from appropriate era, Cold War era cryptography. Modern Russian space agency doesn't use these protocols anymore. They've been superseded multiple times. But activated satellites are broadcasting using encryption keys and methods that were current when satellites were operational 40 years ago. Either satellites somehow retained encrypted memory through decades without power, or something reconstructed their original operating states perfectly. Now let me address the power problem. Satellites require electricity. Solar panels convert sunlight to electricity. Batteries store power for eclipse periods. After 40 years without maintenance, solar panels degrade. Batteries die. Electronics corrode. Thermal cycling over thousands of orbits causes material fatigue. Dead satellites are physically degraded beyond recovery through any known method. Yet 17 satellites simultaneously have power. Not just boot up briefly, then die. Sustained transmission for 73 minutes now and continuing. Cosmos 1408, partially destroyed by anti-satellite test, is transmitting at signal strength, suggesting 200 watts power. That's full operational power level. Its solar panels are 40 plus years old. They should be producing zero power. Its batteries are 40 plus years old. They should be frozen solid. Yet it's broadcasting as if completely functional. The only explanation, external power source. Atlas is transmitting power wirelessly to these satellites. Beamed power, microwave power transmission, laser power transmission, or some exotic physics we don't understand. But somehow, Atlas is energizing objects 2,000 kilometers away with enough power to run their electronics and transmitters. Let me walk you through what this capability means. If Atlas can transmit power wirelessly at 2,000 kilometers, it can reach any satellite in low Earth orbit, ISS, at 400 kilometers. Spy satellites at 300 to 800 kilometers. GPS constellation at 20,000 kilometers if Atlas moves to higher altitude. Nothing is out of range. And if Atlas can power dead satellites, it can interact with living satellites, inject power into systems, overload circuits, burn out electronics, or simply power systems enough to override commands and take control. The electromagnetic signature during activation event supports this. Multiple ground stations detected bursts of radio frequency energy from Atlas at precisely 16 hours, 47 minutes and 12 seconds UTC. Not the normal 1,420 megahertz and harmonic transmissions we've been monitoring. This was broadband pulse across 400 to 6,000 megahertz. High power, directional, aimed at orbital debris field, then sustained transmission at specific frequencies matching power receiver designs from 1970s Soviet satellites. Atlas knew. Atlas knew which satellites were there. Atlas knew which frequencies they used for power reception frequencies, not in public databases. Atlas knew Soviet-era encryption protocols. Atlas knew how to format commands those ancient systems would accept. This wasn't experiment. This wasn't exploration. This was precision operation targeting specific technology with complete foreknowledge of its specifications. Now let me address what satellites are doing besides transmitting. They're maneuvering or attempting to. Ground tracking detected orbital changes in 3 of the activated satellites. Small changes. Delta V of 0.5 to 2 meters per second, but dead satellites don't maneuver. Dead satellites don't have propellant. Yet Molniya 1T09 altered its orbit by approximately 600 meters over 30-minute period. That requires thrust. That requires fuel. That requires systems that haven't worked for 40 years. Either satellites have propellant reserves that survive 40 years, unlikely, because propellants degrade, seals leak, valves freeze, or Atlas is doing something more exotic. If Atlas can transmit power, can Atlas transmit thrust? Directed energy creating plasma expansion? Electromagnetic field interaction with Earth's magnetosphere producing Lorentz force? Or simply commanding satellites to activate thrusters that somehow still function? Whatever mechanism, Atlas isn't just waking up satellites. Atlas is controlling them, moving them, treating 40-year-old Soviet space junk as assets, reactivating dormant fleet, building capability from debris. Let me walk you through military implications. If Atlas can control Soviet satellites from 1970s, 1980s, what about modern satellites? Modern spacecraft are more sophisticated, more secure, more hardened against interference, but they're also more complex, more networked, more dependent on software, more ways to infiltrate if you understand the architecture. Soviet satellites were simple, hardwired logic, minimal software, security through obscurity, yet Atlas compromised them completely. Modern satellites with terabytes of software, network connections, remote update capabilities, more vulnerable, not less. More attack surface, more pathways for sophisticated adversary. Space Command immediately issued highest alert level. All military satellites ordered to enhance monitoring. All systems running diagnostics for unauthorized access. All spacecraft operators checking for anomalous commands or behavior. Because if Atlas demonstrated capability on dead satellites, assumption must be it can do same or worse to operational satellites. International response is forming. Emergency meeting of UN Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space convened within 2 hours of activation detection. First agenda item: unauthorized activation and control of national space assets by non-terrestrial actor. That's diplomatic language for alien spacecraft is hijacking our satellites, and we don't know how to stop it. Russia initially denied satellites were transmitting, then admitted transmissions, but claimed routine malfunction. Then acknowledged Atlas correlation, but insisted no cause-effect relationship proven. Now silence. Because admitting Atlas can control Soviet satellites means admitting significant vulnerability. Cold War technology that Russian military might still partially depend on is compromised. Satellites thought dead might be Atlas's assets now. United States more forthcoming. Space Command briefing to Congress acknowledged anomalous activation of multiple Soviet-era satellites correlated with 3I Atlas orbital position and confirmed assessment of potential electromagnetic interference capability. That's military speak for Atlas can kill or control our satellites, and we're trying to figure out countermeasures. Now let me make predictions. First, within 24 hours, more satellites activate, not just Soviet. Atlas might demonstrate capability isn't limited to one nation's technology. Activate American satellites, European, Chinese, Japanese, show universal capability. Or Atlas might stick with Soviet satellites but activate more of them. Hundreds of Soviet-era objects are in orbit. Only 17 activated so far. Full demonstration might involve 50, 100, 200 objects suddenly coming alive. Second, within 48 hours, Atlas demonstrates control beyond power and transmission, makes satellites maneuver in formation, orient towards specific targets, coordinate activities, proves complete control, not just activation, turns debris field into fleet under Atlas command. Third, within 72 hours, operational satellites show anomalies. Brief unexpected maneuvers, transmission glitches, software resets, nothing catastrophic yet, just indicators that Atlas is probing defenses, testing vulnerabilities, mapping what it can access before using full capability. Fourth, if Atlas's intent is hostile, systematic satellite disabling begins after demonstration completes, not all at once. Strategically, communications first to isolate regions, then navigation to degrade precision targeting, then reconnaissance to blind observers. Progressive degradation of space infrastructure, leaving Earth technologically isolated before ground operations begin. Fifth, if Atlas's intent is diplomatic, activated satellites become communication channel. Atlas uses Soviet satellites as relay network for transmitting message to Earth. Legacy technology becomes bridge between civilizations. We can speak through your old systems. We understand your technology. Now let's talk. 73 minutes ago, Atlas activated 17 Soviet satellites, dead for 40 years. Suddenly broadcasting Soviet military protocols, Cosmos 1000, 408, Molniya, 1T series, Selena D, multiple Cosmos objects, all began transmitting within seconds of each other, staggered by distance from Atlas. Propagation at speed of light. Atlas transmitted electromagnetic pulse at 16 hours 47 minutes and 12 seconds UTC. Broadband 400 to 6000 MHz. High power, directional. Satellites activated as wavefront reached them, now transmitting at 200 watts. Sustained power. External source. Wireless power transmission from Atlas. Some satellites maneuvering. Orbital changes detected. Dead systems executing commands. Atlas new frequencies. Protocols. Encryption. Specifications. Complete foreknowledge. Precision operation. Space Command highest alert. UN emergency meeting. Russia silent. US acknowledges capability assessment. Demand immediate disclosure of all satellite anomalies and Atlas electromagnetic activity. Demand international cooperation on satellite defense protocols. Demand transparency about vulnerability assessment for operational space infrastructure. Atlas demonstrated it can remotely power and control 40-year-old human technology. If it can control dead satellites, it can control living satellites. If it can activate Soviet systems, it can access modern systems. Every spacecraft we operate is potentially compromised. Every space-based capability is potentially under Atlas oversight or control. The demonstration was clear. The message is obvious. Your space is not your domain. We can access your systems. We can control your assets. We can wake dead technology and command it. What we can do to legacy satellites, we can do to modern satellites. You are vulnerable, and we want you to know it. This is power demonstration. This is capability reveal. This is warning or preparation, depending on intent. Stay rational, stay vigilant, and remember that when someone proves they can control your technology remotely, every system becomes suspect. Every satellite might be compromised. Every space asset might be Atlas's asset. We're 38 hours from closest approach. And now we know Atlas can reach out and take control of anything in orbit it wants. The question isn't whether Atlas can disable our space infrastructure. The question is whether Atlas will, and we have less than 2 days to find out.